I was asked how to date as a person with a avoidant personality disorder. That is the question. If I had a straight up answer for that, I would be a millionaire, because even if it is only 1% of the population or something, that would be interested. That would, be absolutely every person with a avoidant personality disorder would be buying it to find out how to do that. So, from my experience, and from what I've heard of other people, now again, this is not definitive by any means. Basically, in my situation, I got to the point where I was so desperate. It's so sad, but it's true. I mean, really, seriously, I was like at the end of my rope. That's when I sort of would allow it to happen. I personally have about a 5-year cycle. I missed the last 2, which was, I mean, like, especially the last one was very conscious effort. Like, I know what's happening and I'm going to do everything I can to not sort of give into it, because I just, the chaos is too much, and you've got to be willing to give up your entire life and fit in as a non-avoidant to be in a relationship. Now, once you get into it, generally you can adapt, but then again, it's really truly like there's no going back. So it's a lot, and of course I have an autistic son, and he takes a lot too. So therefore, I've been really, really conscious of when it comes around and squelching it. That's a better way of describing it. So that's, first of all, I would see if you have a cycle like that. And if you do, then work with the cycle. When it comes around, unless you really, truly have a good reason not to, then I would try to set yourself up to going with it. Okay, I'm not making any sense. Okay, for instance, how to do that. In my case, how I became completely desperate was at the times when I was completely alone. You have to be really, really, really uncomfortable to sort of override the instinct, the self-protectiveness to stay alone and to not interact with somebody. The point is, there is sort of this balance. I mean, people who are avoidant, they want to be with other people. Part of the deal. So, there's that drive. Then there's the self-protective drive to not be with other people, which a lot of the unworthiness, and the thing is that I've studied a ridiculous amount, sort of like how unworthy the human race can be. And I am still shocked by it. Like, really general, normal, considered behaviors that people do, and it's like, okay, well, like, for example, I mean, like, one of my big triggers is selfishness, and I can't fathom how selfish some people are. It's like extreme worthiness or something. And yet they are accepted by society. even though they are remarkably selfish and self-centered and self-interest people, you know. And it bothers me a lot when people are, they cut corners because they want to make their own self better. So the unworthiness, this is going to like hit like a bomb, I'm sure, is not true per se. Mostly because, how to put this, people, the problem is that people, other people sort of have sort of a dysmorphia. That's a really bad way of describing it, but really, truly, they think they're much more worthy than they actually are. It comes down to it, everybody thinks they're much more worthy than they actually are. And, so you run across that. I mean, the thing is, all the things, I mean, if you really tear it apart, I have never met an actual avoidant person who had any truly legit claim to being unworthy. That's hard to say because I'm talking about myself too. But it's the truth. It's bogus. This unworthiness thing doesn't mean that you don't feel it. Doesn't mean that you're not compelled to act on it. I'm just saying, compared to everybody else, truly, it's a non-issue, because there are people who are disgusting human beings, and they get free passes to be worthy. So as far as that goes, when it comes down to it, that should not be the deciding factor. I mean, it is, but it's usually not. It's not that, how do I feel worthy enough as an avoidant person in order to date? It's, how do I get uncomfortable enough so that I'm forced to go out into the world and date somebody? And really, truly, that's what it is. In my cases, like I said, it's harsh to call it desperate, but it really is. I mean, so lonely, so completely, like, for instance, no internet. I don't watch television. It's like not a thing. I mean, that's one of the things. You've got television and you waste all your time watching television. That will keep you from being so desperate. If you're self-medicating, that's a big distraction. It will keep you from getting to the point where, and it will eventually happen. It really does happen. It's really like, I can't believe this is going on, and it's freaky, but it's true. It will get to the point where the part of your avoidance, which is to need to be interacting with people, will override and become more of the driving force, percentage-wise, than the part of your avoidance that says, I can't do that. I've got to be away from people. It happens. And it feels really selfish when you're doing it. You're like, okay, well, I'm imposing myself on somebody else. And you're gonna play mind tricks, like, this person really isn't actually interested in anything to do with me. It's not like a real attraction. It's, they just don't have anything better to do. I mean, your mind will play tricks on you like that. I mean, it's possible, it's true. I mean, if you go get some person that's so completely blitzed in a bar that they've got legit beer goggles, I mean, that could happen. If they come back after that first day, then it's not a beer goggle situation. But that will be the avoidance trying to push back away. Major TMI here. I can tell you that I actively was like, okay, it's at the point. I gotta do something. You know, I gotta have people in my life. And I actively tried to have one night stands. Technically, I don't know if you can see my hands. Can you see my hands? So, because my my pointer finger is longer than my ring finger or something, I don't know. It's supposed to mean like genetically I'm more predetermined to have one night stands. No, I tried 3 times. 3 times ended up in a relationship. And that's what it is. I got to the point where I was like desperate. I was like, I got to have another person. Let's just get that all over with, and let's just boom, burn it out like a firecracker going off, just all at once, boom. Didn't work that way, and I was like, why are y'all coming back? So now I've learned my lesson, which is do not attempt to have a one-night stand, because that probably means I'm going to be stuck with the person. So that's not helpful, I'm sure, in the slightest. But that's what it is. I mean, because that's what happened, is I got so totally lonely and like losing my mind that I basically went out to where people are, and there we go. You know, and people can kind of, they can pick up on it, because when you're at that point, usually when people are sort of like giving people a side eye and not really paying attention to them, when you're at that point, then you're going to be paying attention to people, and you know, because you're soaking it in. You're like, there's people here, let me soak it in, and somebody will notice that you're interested in other people, which being interested in somebody is apparently the most interesting thing that when people first meet that can possibly happen. And it does sort of fall in your lap. And I don't know, and then, you know, so that's not helpful either. I'm sure they're like, oh, it just happens. Okay, well, yeah, it does eventually just happen. But first, you have to get over that wall of avoidance. And again, the way to do it, as crazy as it sounds, is to make your life as lonely and as uncomfortable as you possibly can, and then you'll be able to override, for a short while, the avoidance. And then hopefully good luck with you finding somebody who's decent on the other end. I mean, because I have known people with avoidant personality disorder who are married, and you know, in long-term relationships, and that happens. And the person who's avoidant usually feels like they're the ones to blame for everything that's imperfect, like, not, you know, I mean anything that is slightly imperfect, their fault, and they feel guilty because they're not good enough, etc. But again, even though they do that, that usually isn't, you know, usually at that point, the person, their partner, knows them well enough to sort of go, well, that's just, you know, how they think, and to not really take that so personally. That's hard. And you can work on it, and if you're aware of it, you can do it less. I don't know if this helps at all. Because again, if I had an answer, I would write a book, and I would tell everybody what to do, but I just know, sort of like in retrospect, looking back, that's what happens over and over and over again. In almost all cases, you get to the point where you just can't not allow somebody into your life anymore, and that's when you can go